Amina was born into a small, crowded house at the edge of the city. From the first moment she arrived, she knew the world in ways most children could not. She could not see the bright colors of flowers or the soft glow of sunset, but she felt the warmth of sunlight on her skin and heard the flutter of birds at dawn. Her father, Rahim, held her close whenever she cried, humming gentle tunes and tracing patterns on her hand. In those early days, her blindness was a quiet fact of life, woven into the soft blankets and lullabies of their little home. As Amina grew older, her other senses sharpened. She learned to identify family members by their footsteps. Her father had a slow, measured step, as though he hardly wanted to disturb the peace of the house. Her stepmother, Zarina, clicked impatiently whenever she walked, as if the world owed her something she could not wait to claim. Amina remembered the moment she first noticed that difference, the sharpness in Zarina's walk, the coldness in her touch. She could not understand why Zarina's voice, so full of sighs, sounded different from her father's warm laughter. Despite the tension at home, Amina found comfort in her daily routines. Every morning before the sun rose, she sat beside her father on the front steps. Wrapped in a faded shawl, she listened to the world wake up. The owner of the bakery down the street would slide open his door and toss leftover crumbs to the sparrows. The milkman's bell jingled as his cart bumped over cobblestones. Even as the city stirred to life, the steps remained Amina's favorite place, a quiet threshold between darkness and day, where she could feel the promise of new beginnings. Inside the house, her days followed a careful rhythm. Zarina prepared simple meals: rice with a hint of cumin, lentils cooked until silky soft, flatbread fresh from the tandoor. Amina's father, weak from illness, could not help much, so Zarina took on every task. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles whitened, boiled water until steam curled like smoke, and tucked Amina into bed at night with a brisk pat that felt more like duty than love. Yet Amina sensed no kindness in those gestures, only the weary resignation of someone doing what she felt she must. In contrast, Rahim treated Amina as though she were a delicate flower. He told her stories of distant lands, rolling hills where goats climbed like mountain goats, forests where tigers prowled at twilight, rivers that gleamed like silver ribbons under the moon. To make the tales real, he gathered objects from his own walks: a smooth pebble worn by rushing water, a feather from a stray pigeon, a seed pod shaped like a tiny drum. He let Amina hold each treasure, explaining its shape, its weight, its secret song. In those moments, Amina felt as if she could see again, guided by her father's gentle voice. Amina's greatest joy, however, was music. Every afternoon, her father helped her practice on a worn lute with only 3 strings. The instrument's wood was cracked in places and one string buzzed when plucked too hard, but Amina loved its voice. She pressed her fingertips along the frets, learning each note by sound alone. Song by song, she discovered the lute's secrets: the shiver of a higher pitch, the deep hum of a lower string, the way 2 notes could dance together like fireflies at dusk. Music became her world, a place where darkness had no power and sight was not needed to create beauty. Though Amina's spirit shone brightly, she felt the weight of her family's worries. Her father's illness had no cure, and each doctor's visit cost money they did not have. Zarina's patience grew thin as the bills piled up. At night, whispered arguments slipped through the thin walls. Amina could hear her stepmother's voice tight with frustration, demanding that Rahim find a way to earn more, and Rahim's voice soft as a breeze, saying he would do his best. Amina learned to measure time by these hushed fights, hoping each morning would bring a solution and an end to the fear she felt in her chest. Still, she never lost hope. Every evening she climbed onto the roof with her father, where the wind played through her hair like a friend. Together they watched the city lights flicker on, one by one, like stars come down to earth. Rahim would point out the patterns: a cluster of lights that marked the market, a distant glow where a temple bell rang, the faint flicker where fishermen lit lamps by the river. Amina closed her eyes and imagined the shapes he described, drawing pictures in her mind with strokes of sound and memory. In that shared darkness, Father and daughter spoke without words, weaving dreams of a future bright enough to banish every shadow. Through music and stories, Amina built a world beyond her small house. She imagined herself traveling through fields of wildflowers, each petal singing its own note. She saw herself teaching other children to play the lute by ear, sharing the joy she had discovered. Though Zarina's bitterness sometimes threatened to overshadow her days, Amina held on to her father's unwavering love. It was this love, a melody stronger than any worry, that guided her steps, teaching her that even in a world without sight one could still find beauty, promise, and the courage to dream. The days that followed settled into a heavy rhythm of worry and whispered plans. Rahim's cough grew harsher, shaking his thin body late into the night. Each time he rose to refill his small water jug, Zarina's sigh drifted through the room, like a cold wind, leaving Amina shivering in her cot. The medicine Rahim needed was expensive, and Zarina's hands shook with the weight of their debt. Jars of coins clinked in a dusty corner of the kitchen, but the total never seemed enough. Every morning, Amina awoke to the sound of Zarina counting those coins again, her voice low and tense, as though she were bargaining with the very air. Zarina moved through the house on edge, her thoughts consumed by numbers. She had tried selling woven baskets in the market, but the buyers offered only a fraction of their worth. She had borrowed money from neighbors, promising to repay with interest that grew faster than her hope. And every time Rahim woke her with a gentle request, more food, a blanket to keep out the night chill, her frustration edged closer to anger. Amina sensed the change in Zarina's voice, a sharpness that cut her father's comfort into shards. But Zarina never let her anger reach Amina. Instead, she retreated into hours of silence, staring at the walls as if seeking an answer hidden in the plaster. One evening, when the sky was the color of bruised velvet, Zarina slipped out of the house without waking Rahim. She wrapped her headscarf tightly, as though it could guard her secret thoughts, and walked with determination toward the wealthy district across the river. Amina, restless in her bed, recognized the soft click of Zarina's shoes and called after her. But Zarina did not answer. Instead, she let the door close behind her with a hollow sound that shook Amina's heart. Uncertain and frightened, Amina curled beneath her blanket and fell asleep to the echo of her stepmother's departure. Zarina's destination was a towering building of glass and steel, where powerful men made decisions that shaped entire industries. She carried only a small purse, but within it lay the most precious thing of all, the promise of Amina's future. She had learned of Tariq Khan by chance, overhearing traders gossip in the market. He was a millionaire CEO, known for his taste for rare talents. His wealth was rumored to be matched only by his willingness to pay handsomely for what he desired. Zarina's mind spun with possibilities. If she could convince him that Amina's talent was worth investing in, she might secure enough money to cure Rahim and lift them out of debt. Inside the glossy lobby, Zarina felt a momentary thrill of triumph, until doubt crept in. How could she offer her stepdaughter, a child born without sight, as a commodity? But each time she thought of the unpaid bills and the doctor's looming verdict, her reservations dulled. She climbed the polished staircase to the top floor, where silence reigned and only the soft hum of air conditioning broke the hush. A receptionist, dressed in crisp white, guided her to a private waiting room trimmed with leather chairs and abstract paintings she could only imagine. Time stretched as Zarina smoothed the wrinkles from her dress and rehearsed her words. When Tariq Khan entered, his presence filled the room like the heat of a midday sun. He was tall and imposing, with a tailored suit that spoke of limitless resources. His voice was calm, yet it carried an authority that made even Zarina's resolve quiver. He asked her to sit and listened as she explained her circumstances, her husband's illness, the pile of debts, the hope that she could find a benefactor. Carefully, she described Amina's gift for music, how the child could distinguish each string on the lute by ear alone, how her fingertips danced over the frets as if guided by magic. She spoke of Amina's gentle heart, her unwavering optimism in the darkest times. With every word, Zarina fought the shame she felt, burying it beneath desperation. Tariq leaned back and considered her story like one examines a rare artifact. He asked for proof of Amina's talent and suggested a demonstration. Zarina hesitated. How could she take Amina to this man when she herself felt unworthy of such surety? But the memory of Rahim's hollow eyes, pleading for relief, drove her forward. She agreed to bring Amina the next day, promising to return, with the child at dawn. Tariq's nod was final, as though a judge rendering a verdict. He scribbled a figure on a slip of paper, a sum that would erase every debt and fill their home with enough medicine to last a lifetime. That night, beneath a sky veiled by clouds, Zarina walked home with her head bowed. The money she clutched felt heavier than any stone. She tried to sleep, but dreams of Amina haunted her, the child's laughter echoing in silent halls, her small hand reaching out. Zarina's guilt gnawed at her conscience, yet she told herself that this was for Rahim's sake, for Amina's chance at a better life. If she could secure this fortune, perhaps she could return feeling proud instead of ashamed. Perhaps, she whispered in the dark, this was the only way. Dawn arrived with a pale light that seeped through the dusty curtains. Amina stirred and found her stepmother waiting by the door, holding out a warm piece of flatbread. Zarina's eyes were red, and her voice trembled as she told Amina they were going on a special outing. Amina's heart fluttered with excitement. She imagined a trip to the market or a ride on one of the old city buses. She wobbled to her feet, her shawl wrapped around small shoulders, and allowed Zarina to guide her toward a carriage waiting outside. From the carriage window, Amina felt the wind on her face and the rumble of wheels on cobblestones. She pointed and cooed, asking about each passing sound, the clip of horse hooves, the distant call of a street vendor. Zarina answered curtly, her mind fixed on the meeting ahead. Amina sensed the tension in Zarina's arms and pressed closer, unaware of the transaction that loomed like a storm cloud. The carriage stopped before the same towering glass building, and Amina's excitement turned to confusion as Zarina led her inside. Up the stairs they went again, past the receptionist into the sleek room where Tariq waited. Amina felt the strange hush of the place and pressed a hand to her father's old pendant, worn around her neck for comfort. When Tariq spoke, his voice smooth and unfamiliar, Amina smiled and began to recount the tune she had learned on her lute. She described each note in her mind, weaving the melody into words as her stepmother and the CEO exchanged glances. In that moment, Amina's world was full of sound and hope. She did not know that her future was slipping from Zarina's grasp and into the hands of a stranger, and so the day began with promise, yet carried within it the weight of a choice that would change everything. Amina's music floated through the glass walls, a testament to her spirit, even as Zarina's bargain silently took shape. The bright melodies she sang were a fragile thread between a past she cherished and a future she could not yet imagine. 2. Amina's first steps into the Millionaire's penthouse felt like stepping into another world. The elevator doors opened with a soft whoosh, and she was met by a smooth marble floor that hummed beneath her sandals. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something richer she could not name, perfume or air freshener perhaps. A tall man in a crisp uniform guided them down a silent hallway. His polished shoes clicked in measured time, each tap echoing in the high-ceilinged corridor. Amina held tightly to Zarina's hand, ready to describe every sound she heard, every whisper of silk or brush of fabric against skin. But Zarina's grip was stiff and her breaths came too quickly, as though she had forgotten how to slow her own heart. They came to a large door carved with swirling patterns. A simple push caused it to glide open, revealing a room brighter than any Amina had ever seen. Cream-colored walls rose to meet painted ceilings where golden leaves curled like waves on water. In one corner stood a grand piano, its smooth black curves reflecting light like a dark pool. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, dripping light into every corner. Tiny prisms fell on Amina's skin as she raised her face, and she imagined diamonds showering down. The hush of that space wrapped around her, making her think of a library filled with secrets waiting to be spoken. Tariq Khan sat behind a desk made of dark wood, his chair high and commanding. His eyes, sharp and curious, followed each step Amina took. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that reminded her of a judge weighing evidence. He patted the arm of his chair, inviting her forward. Amina hesitated, then reached out to touch the smooth edge of the desk, anchoring herself in something solid. She sensed Zarina beside her, tense as a bird in a cage, ready to take flight. Tariq's voice was soft when he spoke to her. "I've heard you play, Amina," he said. "Why don't you show me?" Zarina's shaky fingers unknotted the strap of the old lute. The instrument lay in Amina's lap like a friend. She let her fingers find the familiar strings, plucking a gentle chord. The note rang true, pure and vibrating through the silence. Tariq leaned forward, eyes intent, as Amina played the melody her father had taught her. Each string seemed to sing a word of its own. Hope, longing, courage. She closed her eyes, lost herself in the music. The room melted away until all that mattered was the song. But as the final notes faded, Amina felt a shift in the air. Tariq's hands, folded before him, opened into a slow, deliberate clap. The sound echoed like thunder in an empty hall. "Remarkable," he said. "Truly remarkable. A gift such as yours is rare." His words should have brought relief, yet they rang empty. He rose from his chair, each movement controlled. The polished floor made no sound under his feet. He closed the distance between them until Amina could feel the warmth of his presence, like standing too close to a warm stove. She swallowed, her heart pounding as though it might burst. Tariq reached out and placed a hand on the lute, guiding it away from Amina's lap. "Let me see how you handle pressure." His touch was light but carried an unspoken demand. Amina tried to pull back, but he held the instrument steady. Her breath caught as she realized he wanted her to play again, but this time, for him alone, without Zarina's watchful eyes. In her chest, fear took root. She remembered her father's gentle voice and the promise of safety he had given. Now that promise felt miles away. She tried to speak but found no words. Tariq smiled, as though amused by her silence. "You have talent," he murmured, "and talent deserves reward." He stepped closer, too close until Amina felt the heat of his breath. She sensed the power in his stance, the certainty in his voice. The fancy carpets underfoot muffled the sound of her own panic. Her fingers trembled, and for a moment the lute seemed heavier than lead. Memories of home flashed before her. Her father's soft humming, the crowded kitchen, the late-night talks under a starless sky. She could not let those memories slip away. When Tariq moved his hand from the lute towards her shoulder, Amina's world narrowed to a single thought. Escape. Instincts honed by years of careful listening kicked in. She freed one hand from the lute's neck and reached for the heavy glass vase on a nearby table. The vessel stood tall and smooth, its curves catching the chandelier's light. Amina grasped it with both hands, the weight unfamiliar but solid in her grip. Tariq's expression flickered with surprise as she swung the vase in a wide arc. There was a sharp crack as vase met marble, and a gasp echoed through the room. Shards tinkled across the floor like tiny bells. Tariq reeled backwards, hand to his head, eyes wide. Amina dropped the broken pieces and turned, feet flying across the carpet as she ran. Every sound was magnified. The thumping of her shoes, the crackle of glass, the sudden yelp of the uniformed man by the door. She heard Tariq's shouted command but did not look back. The darkness of the service hall beckoned and she plunged into it, guided by the promise of safety and the distant echo of Zarina's name. Behind her, chaos erupted. She heard the slam of doors, the harsh bark of voices, and the scrape of feet on stone. Yet the night felt strangely peaceful around her, each breath she took carrying relief. She did not stop until she burst through a back exit into a narrow alley. The cool air bit at her cheeks as she tilted her face skyward, searching for the moon. For the first time that night she felt tears on her cheeks, tears of fear mixed with the wild surge of triumph. She had faced danger and found her strength. Amina paused to steady herself, hands still trembling, heart racing with victory. In the distance, she heard the drone of voices fading behind closed doors. She slipped down the alley until she reached the small service gate her father had once shown her to escape pretend alarms. The lock was old, and she jiggled the handle until it clicked open. She stepped through into an empty courtyard, the silence as welcome as an embrace. Here, beneath a lone street lamp, she closed her eyes and let her tears fall freely. She thought of her father's stories, of rivers silver under the moon, of fields where fireflies danced. Those tales felt closer now, as though the world had shifted to let her see through sound and memory. She ran her fingers along the rough bricks of the courtyard wall, orienting herself. Each step brought her nearer to safety, to the bright rhythms of her old life. She knew the way by heart, past the fountain where the water sang, around the corner where the baker kept fresh bread for the night shift, then up the narrow street to her home. As she approached her front door, the sound of sobbing met her ears. Zarina crouched on the steps, face buried in her hands, her body shaking. Amina paused, unsure whether to call out. Then she remembered her own tears and the fierce pulse of freedom in her chest. She crossed the last few steps and knelt beside Zarina, hand on her shoulder. Zarina looked up, eyes red but wide with relief. No words passed between them. In that silent reunion, Amina understood that fear could bring people together as powerfully as love. And as the first light of dawn crept across the sky, she felt the promise of a new day, one she would greet with every sense she had, stronger and braver than before. Amina's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the winding service corridors of the penthouse. The sharp click of her shoes on the polished floor echoed behind her, mingling with frantic shouts. Fear and adrenaline fueled her steps, but after a few turns she found herself facing a dead end, a locked iron door with a small grate at eye level. She pressed her hand against the cool metal, hoping it would somehow open, but it resisted. The voices drew closer, and panic fluttered in her chest. Then, almost as if by miracle, the grate slid aside. A soft voice whispered, "Quick, this way." A slim figure in a faded uniform beckoned her forward. Salma, the head housekeeper, had risked everything to help her. Seconds later, they slipped into a dimly lit staircase, the noise of pursuit fading behind them. Amina's heart pounded, but Salma's calm presence guided her down the narrow steps. The smell of garlic and onions drifted from hidden kitchens, and the hush of the staff. Quarters gave way to a faint breeze drifting through a half-open window. Salma placed a gentle hand on Amina's shoulder. "You are safe now," she said, voice steady. "I will take you home." Amina nodded, her fear slowly melting into relief. She pressed her hand to her chest, still feeling the vibration of her own heartbeat. Each floor they descended felt like moving away from a nightmare. The hallway at the bottom opened into a small courtyard, an oasis of vines and lanterns that glowed like fireflies. Salma guided Amina through a side gate, its hinges creaking softly, into a narrow alley behind the building. The moonlight painted silver patterns on the cobblestones, and Amina allowed herself a small smile as the world felt familiar once more. But there was no time to celebrate. Salma hurried along, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting guards at any moment. They turned into a bustling back street where night vendors still sold snacks and chai. The sounds of laughter and conversation rose in a patchwork of voices. Amina felt the comforting hum of life around her, a reminder that the world contained kindness as well as danger. A vendor called out, offering steaming bowls of noodles, but Amina shook her head, still too shaken to eat. Salma led her past stalls of bright silks and jars of pickled fruit until they reached the main road. As they crossed, headlights glared and horns honked, life moving on without pause. Salma pressed a small piece of paper into Amina's hand, an address and a phone number. "Your father," she whispered. "Call him when you can speak. Tell him where you are." Amina folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her shawl. She wanted to thank Salma, to hug her and promise she would never forget her bravery, but Salma was already slipping back into the shadows, ghosting down a quiet side street. Before Amina could call out, Salma disappeared, leaving her alone under the flickering street lamps. Alone again, Amina hesitated. Her legs trembled, but she knew she had to keep moving. She imagined her father waiting at home, growing more worried with every passing minute. Rahim's cough would have kept him awake until dawn, listening for sounds at the door. Amina pictured him clutching his thin blanket, fear etched into his pale face. She could not let him wait any longer. Gathering her courage, she set off through the night toward the address Salma had given her. The road home wound through winding lanes and quiet squares. Amina counted the turns silently. Right at the old banyan tree, left past the shuttered grocery, then straight along the low wall lined with hibiscus bushes. Each landmark felt like an old friend guiding her way. When she reached the small iron gate of her home, her heart lurched. The door was slightly ajar, and a single lantern burned inside. She squeezed through the gap and paused on the threshold, afraid to step forward. Inside, the air was thick with worry. A soft crying came from the bedroom, and Amina recognized the gentle timbre of her father's voice through tears. "Where is my little songbird? Oh, Amina." The sound shattered her. She hurried across the threshold, calling, "Baba!" Her voice trembled, but it carried through the house. Rahim lifted his head, eyes shining with relief and confusion. His frail body sat upright in the bed, blankets pooled around him. He reached out a trembling hand. "My child," he whispered. Amina rushed forward and wrapped her arms around him, leaning against his frail frame. Her knees buckled, and Rahim caught her, pulling her close. She felt his heart hammering against her ear as tears of joy and fear streamed down her face. Zarina stood to the side, her face pale and shadowed with guilt. When she saw Amina in her father's arms, she dropped to her knees, burying her face in the quilt. "Forgive me," she sobbed. "I never meant to." But her words broke as she choked on her tears. Amina, still holding her father, lifted a hand and gently touched Zarina's shoulder. In that moment, the hurt and betrayal simmered beneath Amina's forgiveness. She allowed Zarina's hand to find hers. No words were needed. The reunion spoke, of fear survived and love that could still heal. In the days that followed, the police arrived with quiet efficiency. They took statements from Amina and Salma. Salma's testimony carried weight, uncovering the truth of what Tariq had intended. Zarina, too, confessed her part in the terrible bargain, her shame clear in every faltering word. Amina's father sat by her side as she spoke to the officers, his hand clasping hers in support. Though he struggled to breathe, his eyes shone, with pride at his daughter's bravery. Tariq Khan faced the consequences of his actions. His power and wealth mattered little when weighed against the evidence and the testimony of a determined child. The trial became a symbol of justice, showing that even the mighty could be held accountable. In court, Amina's voice was steady. She told the judge how she had felt each moment, how her heart had pounded when she struck the vase, how relief had flooded her when Salma saved her, how hope had guided her home. Her words resonated, and the verdict was swift. Back home, life slowly returned to its gentle rhythms. Rahim's health improved with proper care and medicine, supplied by the compensation awarded to them. Zarina, humbled, devoted herself to making amends, tending the garden, and cooking meals with a tenderness she had once reserved only for her own comforts. Amina spent her days practicing the lute on the front steps, the same spot where she had first learned to hear the world awaken. Passers-by paused to listen, amazed at the melodies that floated through the morning air. A new chapter began when a local school for the visually impaired opened its doors to her. There, Amina found friends who understood her world. She learned to navigate with a white cane, to read books written in raised dots, and to share her music with classmates who played everything from drums to flutes. The joy of learning together, of exploring possibilities, filled her with renewed purpose. But the memory of that night never left her. It shaped her determination to help others in dark times. With her father's blessing, she began volunteering at a small community center, teaching blind children to play instruments by ear. She told them stories of hope, reminding them that even in silence and shadows, music could light the way. At home, every evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amina and Rahim climbed onto the roof together. The city lights blinked on, one by one, and the sounds of night rose around them. Dog barks, distant conversations, the lull of evening prayers. Amina closed her eyes and felt the warmth of her father beside her. She strummed a gentle chord on her lute, and they listened. Together. In that shared silence, they both knew that no matter how dark the night, courage and love would always guide them home. 2. Life after the trial brought a wave of unexpected attention into Amina's life. Reporters from the local newspaper came to interview her, drawn by the courage of a young blind girl who had stood up to injustice. At first, Amina felt shy under the glare of bright lights and the hum of cameras. But as she spoke of her love for music and her desire to help others find their own voices, something warmed inside her. A new confidence that grew with every question answered. Invitations arrived. The city council wanted her to perform at a charity event, a radio station asked for an interview, and a nearby school of music offered her a scholarship. In each moment, she found herself surrounded by kindness and respect, reminders that her story could inspire change far beyond her small home. With the scholarship, Amina began formal lessons at a respected music institute not far from the riverbank, where she once imagined silver ribbons under moonlight. Her days filled with piano technique, singing exercises, and lessons in music theory. Subjects she once feared would be inaccessible to her. Her teachers, impressed by her natural talent, adapted their methods. Sheet music transcribed into embossed notes for her fingertips, lessons delivered with extra-verbal descriptions, and classmates who learned alongside her, curious and supportive. Though the work was challenging, Amina approached each task with the same determination that had guided her through darkest nights. She practiced scales until her fingers knew each pattern by heart, and she recorded her own compositions on a small recorder, listening back to refine every phrase. As her own world expanded, the bond with Zarina shifted once again. The stepmother who had betrayed her now worked beside her in small ways, helping prepare for concerts, guiding her through busy streets, and reminding her of safety in crowded places. Sometimes, when Amina returned home late from rehearsal, she would find Zarina waiting with herbal tea and a warm scarf. They did not speak of the past betrayal, but in quiet gestures, a hand on the shoulder, a shared silence, they rebuilt trust brick by brick. Zarina attended Amina's performances, standing at the back of the hall and feeling pride shimmer through her. In time, she began to help the community center's cooking lessons, offering simple recipes that brought neighbors together and finding joy in giving rather than taking. Rahim's health continued to improve. With proper medicine and care, his cough eased and color returned to his cheeks. He walked without his cane more often, and his laughter, once thin and tired, grew steady and bright. Every evening he visited Amina's classes, sitting in the front row and applauding each new composition with tears in his eyes. He introduced her to neighbors who remembered her lullabies, telling them, "This is my daughter, whose music saved us all." Amina's heart swelled with gratitude for her father's unwavering belief. His strength guided her as she chose a new dream, not only to become a musician but to create a space where other children with disabilities could discover their own talents. With that vision, Amina and Zarina approached the local community council to propose a free music and art center for children with disabilities. At first, the idea met hesitation. Funds were scarce and officials were unsure of the need. Undeterred, Amina organized a small fundraising concert in the courtyard of her old home. Neighbors came with pots of biryani and homemade sweets, filling the space with warmth and chatter. Under a string of lanterns, Amina played the lute and piano, her melodies weaving stories of hope and resilience. Friends of Salma's, a few teachers and shopkeepers volunteered to help. By the end of the evening, enough donations had been collected to rent a modest room in the center of town. The first music and arts haven was born. Running the center brought new challenges. Rent rose, instruments needed repair, and some families doubted whether a blind girl could lead such a project. Amina faced each setback with the same courage she had shown before. When a grant application was rejected, she composed a letter detailing the children's smiles and the community's growing support. When instruments went missing, she organized workshops where young volunteers built simple percussion drums from recycled materials. She learned to write reports, hold meetings, and schedule lessons. Through every obstacle, her calm voice reminded everyone why they had trusted her, because she believed in each child's potential as fiercely as she believed in her own. As months turned into years, the music and arts haven flourished. Word spread to neighboring towns, and once skeptical officials began to see its value. Amina traveled by bus to rural villages on weekends, carrying her white cane and portable recorder. She taught under mango trees and in dusty courtyards, showing children how to find rhythm in everything, from raindrops on tin roofs to the footsteps of goats on hills. Parents watched, amazed, as their children who had once sat silent began to clap and hum. Teachers invited her to lead workshops at regional schools. Through her simple lessons, clapping games, humming exercises, and hands-on instrument exploration, she opened doors to confidence and joy that transcended any physical limitation. In quiet moments, Amina reflected on her journey. She remembered the hush of the penthouse, the weight of the vase in her hands, and the fear that had driven her flight through shadowed corridors. She acknowledged the darkness she had endured, but she focused on the light she now carried within. She kept a small journal, pages embossed with dots, where she wrote poems about sunrise, about strings of music connecting heart to heart, and about the gentle power of community. Each entry was a testament to resilience, a reminder that even the smallest melody could become a symphony of hope. Today, on the eve of the center's 5-year anniversary, Amina prepared for a special charity gala. The hall was draped with silk banners bearing the center's emblem, a stylized lyre intertwined with a guiding hand. Guests spilled in, local leaders, teachers, families of her students, and donors who had once hesitated but now watched with admiration. Rahim, healthy and dapper in a simple kurta, settled into his seat beside Zarina, who beamed with pride. As Amina took the stage, her white cane resting at her side, she paused and closed her eyes. The hush that followed reminded her of the first time she played for Tariq, but this time the silence felt like a gentle breeze, encouraging her onward. She began with a simple lute melody, a piece she had composed for her father's 70th birthday. The notes rose and fell, carrying memories of moonlit rooftops and sparrow-filled mornings. Then, joined by her students, she transitioned into a lively ensemble. Drums tapped in steady patterns, flutes sang clear notes, and voices hummed in harmony. The audience rose, clapping in time, swept up by the joyful sounds. By the final chord, tears glistened on many cheeks. Amina opened her eyes, guiding her smile toward her father, whose applause rung like thunder in her heart. That night, as the guests departed and the lanterns burned low, Amina led Rahim to their favorite spot, the roof where the city lights blinked on one by one. She carried a small lantern, and together they watched the quiet streets below. The air held the scent of honeysuckle and distant jasmine. A gentle breeze whispered through the tinsel of power lines overhead, and the city slept in soft rhythms of breathing and night prayers. Amina lifted her lute and plucked a single chord, bright and clear. Her father's hand rested on her shoulder, steady and sure. In that peaceful moment, she realized that her journey, from darkness to music, from fear to purpose, was still unfolding. Each melody she had played, each child she had taught, each hand she had held, had become part of a larger song, and though she could not see the future, she felt its shape in the harmony of voices and the promise of tomorrow's dawn. With her father by her side and her community around her, Amina knew that no night was too dark, no path too uncertain, for the light of courage and love to guide her onward.